So how did Confucianism become a religion? Again, the picture there is of the Temple of Confucius in Beijing, China. Um, so let's talk a little bit about sort of the development of Confucianism. And please understand, I am about to grossly oversimplify when it comes to both of these religions. I'm going to squeeze about 2,500 years of history into just a few minutes. But fasten your seatbelt and try to take good notes. After Confucius died, there were two main scholars who interpreted the work of Confucius and continued to make his work, his teachings known. One of these was named Mencius. Now, that is actually not his real Chinese name. I'm not even aware of his real Chinese name. Mencius, you should be able to guess, was a Latinized name that was given to this gentleman by the Jesuit missionaries in the 1600s, I think. You can tell it's Latin because it ends with us, as in my Latin name, Claudius, that's my name in Latin, Marcus, Julius, so on and so forth. But Mencius came after Confucius, and as he interpreted the teachings of Confucius, he basically believed that human nature was essentially good. And so his way of interpreting all the things Confucius taught was to say, people are basically good, and so we need to just follow the rituals, the rules about propriety. We need to follow those because those will bring out that good nature in people and shape it and develop it so that all these good-natured people can get along with each other. Now, you can read some of the writings of Mencius in your book, in Ethics 2, beginning on page 316. By the way, I hope you've figured out by now that when I specifically point out a reading in the lecture, you really want to make sure you do that. And the other person who came after Confucius was a scholar by the name of Sunzi. Sunzi. In the Pinyin romanization, it's Sunzi. There you see it also spelled Sun Tzu, and that's the Wade-Giles romanization. But the big thing you want to know about this gentleman, mark this down, is that he taught that human nature is bad, that people are basically bad. And so his understanding of the work of Confucius was, look, people are born evil, and so we got to teach them the li and the ren. We have got to teach them the rituals and the propriety so that it can sort of hammer the badness out of them and hammer ren, human-heartedness, into them so that these bad people can get along and live in society together without tearing each other apart. You read some of his writings in Ritual 1 on page 309. Now, as you read those two readings, pay attention to the different perspective of these two scholars who came after Confucius. Now, in 136 CE, this is when Confucianism starts to become an institutional, organized religion. The Han Dynasty made Confucianism the official state orthodoxy. The five classics, which I told you about last week, became the official canon. The canon means the rule. It comes from a Greek word that means rule. If you are holding in your hand a Christian Bible, you are holding the canon of Scripture that the Christian Church has designated. These are the official sacred writings. So the five classics in 136 CE were officially recognized as the canon of Confucianism. Remember that the 5 classics are the Yi Jing, sometimes also called the I Ching, and that means the Book of Changes. Could also be called the Classic of Changes. The Li Ji, the Record of Rites. The Shi Jing, the Book of Odes. The Shu Jing, the Book of History. And the Cheng Qiu, which is the Spring and Autumn Annals. Now, it was understood that Confucius edited the first 4 and wrote the 5th one. These became required reading for all Chinese students. And if you wanted to get a job in the government, you needed to memorize the 5 classics because they were the basis of the civil service exam. Now, one of the things about Confucius, one of the values that he taught, was that leadership should not just be based on heredity. You know, in a monarchy, you have a king, and the kingship is passed on to the king's heir, male, or if he doesn't have a male heir, then you get Queen Elizabeth I or Queen Elizabeth II. But it's passed on through heredity. Well, Confucius said, no, it should be based on ability. And beginning with the Han Dynasty, they took that seriously. And so they created this civil service exam. And people could enter into government work not just based on, you inherited it, but based on your skill and ability as measured by the civil service exam. Now, this continued in some form with only a few interruptions until 1905. So beginning in 136, the year 136, for over 1,000 years until 1905, the teachings of Confucius were the basis of the exam that you had to take if you wanted to work for the Chinese government. Now, for some reason, Confucianism sort of fell out of favor during the Tang Dynasty, 618 to 907. This would sort of correspond with what we call medieval times, the medieval period, the Middle Ages, the Dark Ages in European history. At that point in time, for some reason, Confucianism kind of fell out of favor. So that was the short interruption. But it was revived during the Song Dynasty, 960 to 1279, still a part of the Middle Ages in European history. And what we got during the revival, during the Song Dynasty, was something called NeoConfucianism. Neo meaning new, NeoConfucianism, not to be confused with a modern movement within the last century called New Confucianism, which I'm not going to talk about, but don't get it confused. Neo-Confucianism is what happened during the Song Dynasty, 960 to 1279. And there were 2 things that made it neo. 1, they borrowed some elements from Taoism and Buddhism. You know, one of the things that happened in 136 CE and thereabouts is that the Buddhists came to China. And they were very organized. They had monks and nuns, and they had a canon, scriptures, and they had teachings, and some scholars believe that it was the coming of Buddhism that caused Taoism and Confucianism to sort of get organized and institutionalized. Well, Neo-Confucianism borrowed some elements from Taoism and Buddhism, some of the more supernatural, spiritual elements to go along with all the teaching about right behavior and conduct and ritual that was already present in Confucianism. That was one of the new elements. The second one is that they switched to the canon. The canon switched from the 5 classics to the 4 books. And these are the Analects, which are the writings of Confucius, the sayings of Confucius, which you did your discussion post on that last week. The Great Learning was another book. The Mencius, which was the book written by Mencius. It was named after him. And then the fourth one was called The Doctrine of the Mean. And this was everything Confucius said about how to handle difficult people and bullies. The mean people. No, that's not what it's about. It's about statistics. You know, in statistics, you have the average, the median, and the mean. And so this is a statistical book. No. The Doctrine of the Mean is about the middle way. It's about avoiding extremes. It's about the idea that the truth and proper behavior are on neither extreme, but somewhere in the middle, the mean, the middle way. Now, another thing that happened is somewhere along the way, Confucius' home in Chufu became a temple, and it remains that to this very day. The state paid his descendants to live there. 77 generations of the descendants of Confucius were paid salaries and allowances by the state of China to live in Confucius' home in Chufu, which was also considered a temple to Confucius. This continued until 1949, when, as you hopefully remember from world history, we had the Communist Revolution in China. Confucian temples were built all over China, Korea, and Japan. State sacrifices were made to Confucius, not human sacrifices, and I don't even think animal sacrifices, maybe in the very early days, but mostly this was sacrifices of incense and sacrifices of food and fruit and vegetables. This continued until 1928, which was less than 100 years ago. And Confucius' birthday, remember this date, September 28th. Also my mother's birthday, but Confucius' birthday is also called Teacher's Day. And so it is a day to celebrate Confucius because he is understood as the first teacher, not first chronologically, not the first person who ever taught, but first in the sense of prime, principal, most important. And so you celebrate Confucius' birthday, but you also celebrate your teachers, your school teachers, religious teachers, mentors, other teachers that you have. So September 28th, Confucius' birthday and Teacher's Day. And this was something that the state sponsored and still sponsors in Taiwan, I think in Korea. I'm not sure if the state sponsors it in Korea. It's done in Korea, but it is sponsored in Taiwan. So these are, again, some examples of how Confucianism kind of went from a philosophy to a religion. Now, I mentioned 1949, Mao Zedong, the Communist Revolution in China. One of the things they wanted to do was get rid of Confucianism because they said, that's the old way, that's the old stuff, that's authoritarianism and the patriarchy and all that bad stuff, hierarchy. Confucianism is not about equality. And so this is an example of a propaganda poster during the Communist Revolution. And what those words at the bottom say is that this is Confucius rewriting history to make himself look good. But in fact, he was a slave owner and he taught slavery and he was bad, and you should quit listening to Confucius. Well, the early communists in China tried to stamp it out, but they frankly did not succeed. And today, Xi Jinping, who is the president of the People's Republic of China, is trying to bring back Confucianism. Now, some would say this is because, he's a communist and communists are authoritarian. They want to be in charge of people and rule people's lives. And so he wants to bring back Confucius just to bolster his totalitarianism. That's what some critics would say. Others would say, no, he's really trying to get in touch with what is it that makes China unique. And others would say, he grew up in Confucianism and it had a positive impact on him, and now he wants it to have a positive impact on all of China. Please watch these two videos about Confucianism. One is called The China's Communist Party Turns to Confucius. The other is The Ceremony of Confucius. Do not skip those. You will be tested on those.